Lesson 3.2. What we're going to be doing today in Lesson 3.2 is we're going to be solving equations using multiplication and division. So if you remember yesterday, what we did was we solved equations, but we used addition and subtraction, okay? Addition and subtraction. So if I had a problem like x plus 6 equals 12, I said, okay, I want to solve for x, so I need to subtract 6 on both sides, because I would do the inverse, and I would get x is equal to 6. Or, okay, I had a problem like x minus 6 is equal to 12, and I realized I need to add 6 to both sides, and x is equal to 18. We were able to solve these using inverse operation. Today, we're doing the exact same thing. The only difference is we're going to be using multiplication and division. So we went over this already. Inverse operations. The inverse to addition is what? Subtraction. What's the inverse to subtraction? Addition. So today, when we do multiplication and division, it's the same thing. The inverse to multiplication is division, and the inverse to division is multiplication. All right, so let's solve some of these problems. In order to find out what the inverse is or what I've got to do, I've got to know what's going on originally, okay? So I asked myself, what's happening between the -4 and the x? What operation? Is it addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division? Multiplication. Listen. This is the most common mistake people make, is they see this negative sign and they go, okay, add 4 to both sides. No, that's not what's happening, okay? That's a -4, but I have to ask myself, what's happening between the -4 and the variable? Multiplication. So I know the opposite of multiplication is division. So I divide both sides by -4. Is 1 over -4 -4? No, it's -1/4. So my answer is -1 over 4, okay? Again, I can plug this back in really quickly using my calculator. -4 times -1 over 4, and I get +1. So I know I got the right answer. Okay, does everybody see how we did that? And you always want to divide by exactly what's being multiplied. So I divide by -4. Another really careless, easy mistake to make is you forget about the signs. Don't forget about the signs. 2 negatives make a positive, 1 negative, or 3 negatives makes a negative, okay? So what would I do on this next problem, Trent? Exactly, divide by -3, because I asked myself, okay, what's happening between the -3 and the x? Multiplication. So the opposite of that is division, and I divide by exactly what's being multiplied, which is -3. So my answer is -2 over 3. All right, I could plug that back in really quick and check it. -3 times -2 over 3 is 2. All right, what would I do on the next one, Abby? Exactly, I divide by 2 on both sides. Now, why wouldn't I divide 22? Asia? Exactly. It's not on the same side as the variable. I always have to divide by the number that's on the side as the variable. So 22 divided by 2 is x equals 11. Okay? And lastly, Rashid, what would I divide by here? Divide by 30. Now look at this. I would get b is equal to 5 over 30. Is that an acceptable answer? No. I've got to reduce that fraction. What is 5 over 30 reduced? 1/6. That is my final answer. Do not give me 5 over 30. It will not be right. Okay? So the next type of problem we have is we've got division problems. So what's the opposite of division or the inverse of division? What is it? Multiplication. So I asked myself, what's happening between the x and the 5? Oh, division. Okay, so the only way to get that x by itself is to multiply. But what am I going to multiply by? Asia? 5, exactly. So I can write the multiplication by 5 up here. What happens is that cancels out. It doesn't become 5x. Don't write that there, okay? When you multiply, it cancels out. Then whatever I do to one side, I've got to do to the other. So I get x is equal to what? Negative 150. Okay, so in the next problem, what should I do, Brittany? Multiply by 9. Very good, because I see, okay, x is being divided by 9. So the inverse would be to multiply by 9. And what is x equal to? Who knows? Anybody got the calculator out? Emily? Negative 225 is very good. That's perfect, okay? Remember, Chapter 3, we are allowed to use our calculator. It was only Chapter 2 that we were not allowed any calculators, okay? And lastly, what am I going to do here, Cameron? Multiply by negative 4. Cancels out, and I multiply this by negative 4. Well, I'm going to write negative 4 over 1 so I can see it as a fraction so it'll be easier. And look at what can happen. What can I do here? Do I need to multiply like this, or can I simplify? What'd you say, Rashid? Exactly. Let's simplify. 4 goes into 4 one time. 4 goes into 4 one time. So what's negative 3 times negative 1 over 1? 3, exactly. Count up your negative signs. How many do I have? 2. So I know that m is equal to positive 3, okay? Okay, the last type of problems that we are going to do is we are going to solve for the variable when there is a fraction in front of it, okay? Technically, what a fraction is its multiplication and division. So I could solve this first by multiplying both sides and then dividing both sides, but that's just going to make more work for myself, okay? I can solve this by doing one simple step, and this is what it is. First of all, you ask yourself, okay, what's going on between negative 2/3 and m? What operation do I see? Multiplication. So I would say, all right, opposite of that is division. But can I ever divide by a fraction? No. So what do I do instead of dividing by fractions? Multiply by the reciprocal. So what I can do here is anytime, is everybody listening? Anytime you see a fraction in front of the variable, so this negative 2/3 is in front of the variable, automatically know, multiply by the reciprocal. So what's the reciprocal of negative 2 over 3? Negative 3 over 2. So I multiply. Look what happens. The 3's cancel out. The 2's cancel out. So it totally goes away on that one side. But remember, whatever you do to one side, I've got to do to the other. So that means I need to multiply by negative 3 over 2. I put 10 over 1 so that it makes it easier for me. And can I simplify this? Yep. So let's change my 2 to a 1, 10 to a 5. And what does m equal? Negative 15. Very good. Don't forget about your signs. Don't forget that I had to multiply by negative 3 over 2. Okay? Let's look at this next one. Again, I see there's a fraction in front of my variable. So the easiest way for me to do this is to do what? Multiply by the reciprocal. What's the reciprocal? Negative 8 over 7. Again, don't forget your signs. Whatever that fraction is, you got to multiply by the reciprocal. That's the exact same sign. Whatever I do to one side, I've got to do to the other. Cancel out. I have 7 goes into 7 one time. 7 goes into 14 two times. And what does x equal? Negative 16. Very good. All right, what would I do on this one? Multiplication of what? 6 over 1, because I want to do the reciprocal, so it cancels out. So I multiply this side by 6 over 1. Well, look, I can change these to 1s. And what does d equal? 5. Okay, so that's how we solve equations using multiplication and division. And then when I see a fraction, I multiply by the reciprocal. Okay, do not forget, you do have a quiz on Monday over 3.1 and 3.2.